The New York Times sues over training ChatGPT. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by Coda, your all-in-one collaborative workspace. Get started with Coda for free now and get a $1,000 credit at coda.io/MacVoices. You know, we have a lot of things here I wanted to get to tonight, but I want to definitely get to this one, and not just because it's part of Mark's background, but also I think it's really, really interesting. Did I? Yes. Sorry. I want to make sure I put it in the chats right. But as Mark alluded to earlier, that the New York Times has sued OpenAI for, I guess, infringement on their copyrights, on their material, for allegedly training ChatGPT on New York Times articles. This isn't the first one of these suits we've seen, but it I guess, potentially, arguably, might be the largest. And so, kind of where do we go from here with this? Is it realistic to expect them to win this? And if they do, will it be just damages, or how will this work out? Anybody have any thoughts on it?
I always have thoughts.
I knew it, Jeff. I was hoping so.
Here's my thought. I don't know. No, we are in the very early stages of the whole AI training thing. And so seriously, this is land that has not been tread on yet. And cases like this will naturally be part of the process as we figure out what qualifies as a fair use of content like what the New York Times is producing. And the New York Times, I think, they would be remiss if they weren't very actively looking at how the content they're creating is being used in other contexts. So, yeah, this lawsuit doesn't surprise me at all. And this lawsuit and many that will come after it are going to help shape what is all right and what isn't as far as content for training AI models. My guess, and this is at this point just wild speculation, because like I said, we are so early in the whole process. I think eventually we're going to find that we end up with a system that on some level creates a compensation for the sources that are used to train AI models in this sense. And for right now, what we're looking at, it's not AI in general. This is focused on large language models. And it's important to keep that distinction, because the large language model part of this is what's really taken off in the public eye since thanks to OpenAI. So we're going to be in for some surprises. Some big publishers will like, some they won't. But it's going to be a fun ride, and it's going to take a while.
Maybe I'm splitting hairs here, or maybe I just don't get it. But if if OpenAI had gone behind the New York Times paywall and trained it using articles there, that feels like one thing. But to train it on things that were openly available, that anyone could go to the New York Times website and read. I get the fact that there are copyright issues, but it just feels a bit different. It doesn't feel like anything was misappropriated. But maybe I'm not getting
even in that case, Chuck, if I purchase a book and learn a skill and then make money with what I learned in that book, do I owe the author of the book money?
Here's another spin on that, Jim. You go into your local store and they're playing a radio station. should the store be paying licensing to play that music that's coming from the radio? I do know the answer to this.
That's been decided, yes, hasn't it?
That's been decided, yes. Yes. And so is that going to be the same for content that's created by news publications?
But that's not what the question is. The question is, if you learn something, does that mean, now if you use that learning, you have to pay the, whatever the source of the learning was. That's not the same thing as playing, an exact, that the analogy to what you're saying would be if you had a big screen in the store and you displayed the New York Times on that screen, as is.
Okay. Not a perfect analogy. But we don't have perfect analogies yet. In a case like this, it feels to me like, and keep in mind, I'm not an attorney. However, I have played one on stage more than once. It feels to me like this is a situation where it's not you are learning something or the computer is learning something. It's you are appropriating information that someone else created and you're repurposing it to your own end en masse.
That's called learning.
Is it called learning when you're feeding it into a computer?
That's the definition of learning.
And see, this is what's going to be happening in the courts, where the New York Times will say, no, OpenAI is just taking our content.
And they may prevail, but I do think that a case can be made that that's just learning, and we're gonna, like everything else new, we're gonna, it's gonna get litigated.
It's absolutely going to get litigated.
But I don't think it's open and shut that the New York Times is correct.
And I'm not saying New York Times is correct because I don't know. What I can say for certain is that it bothers me to know that all the content that I have written for multiple publications has all been scraped into OpenAI, and it is being used to create other content. And in many cases, when people ask OpenAI to write something in the style of a specific person, it's just lifting what they wrote in whole cloth somewhere in an actual piece and dumping it into this.
If it does that, I think that is sue their pants off.
And
absolutely,
and that's going to definitely come up in this as well.
That's not learning. That's plagiarism.
Exactly. Yes. So I'm sure, because there are multiple documented cases of this, this is something that will come up in the case as well. And maybe by the time the cases are like really getting resolved, the newer LLMs won't do that.
Mark?
We'll see.
Okay, yeah. A bunch of thoughts. Yeah. Plagiarism is wrong. And we even learned today, Harvard president resigned over plagiarism. But, bringing back to the discussion here, I think the issue is maybe not so much learning and how you apply something, but I think there is a general idea in IP of creating a derivative work. And certainly, all the contracts I've involved in regarding, various, either pure creative things like a script or a movie, or IP like software that we're purchasing, etc. There are general tough sounding provisions to try to protect against. Okay, not only you cannot take this verbatim, but you can't take all of what you've learned about this algorithm and apply it in some other way. On a broad base, that conflicts with sort of the fair use doctrine. Of yes, you can take and play 30 second or 13-second, part of, a Taylor Swift song as a background, for, a story, but, you can't provide more. And I don't know exactly what the cutoff is, but, there's a well-established laws of limits of how much you can use for purpose of reporting of, Taylor Swift has a new leading album, or you do a parody, etc. I think we're seeing now that just because of the capability of these LLMs, large language models, that we're opening up all sorts of new questions. And I've tried, to tell ChatGPT as well as the Microsoft thing, give me the first paragraph of the New York Times obituary for Queen Elizabeth or Richard Nixon, and can out flat do it. So when I started to read some of I didn't get through the 76-page complaint. I only got to like page 30 and skimmed through the rest. But some of the things that I saw, they indicated, they had a little prompt. And the prompt was maybe the first, 8 or 10 words of the story. So I tried copying that and putting into either of them, and they come back with, they don't come back with anything. So, they come back with, okay, well, we could tell you more about this or the other thing, just query more things, but it makes me wonder about the veracity, which is a polite way of saying, is there some scumbag liar there who's ginned up this case? Is it a sense of entrapment, for the ChatGPT model, purposely for the benefit of the New York Times? Because I couldn't get anything to reproduce it. I didn't spend more than 5 minutes. I'm sure if somebody spent a day, maybe they might be able to do it. Or if they give them, a 30-word extract, of the article that ChatGPT might, spit back the rest of it. I have no idea. So, point number one is we don't know the veracity of these claims, and it doesn't match with anything I've experienced in my own, common life. Number two, a lot of the claims, seem over the top and hysterical, and they're just flat out fiction, saying, this model stores this thing. That's not how these models work. They do not store the verbatim text. They store, relative frequency of, when you say, good, what's the frequency? Day, morning, evening, or it's a very nice sunny in the day, that's, so they store your probabilities of, text sequences of varying lengths. That's how they work. And, these claims, I think, are just, and again, I don't know how this will rule, if it goes to a jury or it goes to a judge. But, I think their claims are bogus. I think they might have a stronger, case in terms of, just, we have copyrighted material and we should be, compensated in some way for your training on it. But again, to Chuck's point, if it's freely out there and they're not going through, a paywall and sucking the site dry, then maybe the New York Times just doesn't have a great case. And we're going to learn a lot here. And as Jeff was saying, there's many, many open questions about IP. That we're going to see, evolve and get decided over the next couple of years. Because, the thing about these that are different, to Jim's point, I know a lot of, people who are consultants where they say, I made so much money, I took the chart from so-and-so's book on page 73 and I use that in 6 different projects. And, that's learning, but, because, chat tools like the LLMs, they have a huge scale and they make it so accessible in a very compressed, time period. It immediately invokes, questions. Oh, this is plagiarism or copyright violation. I don't think so. We've discussed here in the panel before of, what degree of intelligence or creativity should be ascribed to LLMs. But, these are all open questions, and let's strap in because 2024 is going to be a fascinating year to watch a lot of this stuff evolve.
Eric? Muted.
Sorry. I thought I would rush things along and just silence myself.
Yeah.
I mean, that covered most of what I was going to say. My understanding was that a prompt of an article title was spitting back much of the initial paragraph of the article, and then supplying the next chunk was giving you the next bit. My guess is there was just an error in one of the structures they used to build up the articles, and it was easy enough once the complaint existed to fix that so you couldn't generate it that way anymore. So it doesn't surprise me that you weren't able to reproduce it. That's not at all different from when someone would ask um, um, Apple's person through the speaker to spit back, a joke or something, and a joke would come back that wasn't appropriate or was, wrong or a bad answer. And as soon as it got published, nobody could reproduce it because Apple fixed it behind the scenes. I think that will happen a lot more. The time frame between getting the behavior you don't want to see and having it fixed as soon as somebody realizes there might be an expense is going to shorten just as things kind of get repaired. I don't think it should happen in the first place, but maybe just the threat of this kind of lawsuit will be enough to add some more cautions to these models as they're building them.
This edition of MacVoices is supported by Coda, your all-in-one collaborative workspace. Get started with Coda for free and get a $1,000 credit at coda.io/MacVoices. If you're looking for a better way to organize your business or even just your projects, Coda should be the first stop in your research. By bringing together the best of documents, spreadsheets, and apps into one platform, Coda stops you ping-ponging between different tabs and tools. Coda is amazing if you collaborate with remote colleagues, and it really helps centralize all of your processes and shared knowledge. Since the beginning of the year is when you map out where things go from here, it's the perfect time to get started with Coda, especially its extensive planning capabilities. With Coda, you can stay aligned by managing your planning cycles in one location, set and measure OKRs with full visibility across teams, communicate and collaborate on documents, roadmaps, and whatever else you need to collaborate on instantly, and access hundreds of templates and get inspired by others in Coda's gallery. If you want a platform that empowers your startup to strategize, plan, and track goals effectively, you can get started with Coda today for free and get a $1,000 credit at coda.io/MacVoices. That's a special limited time offer for startups, and that means that you begin planning right now at no cost. That's Coda, coda.io/MacVoices to get started for free and get a $1,000 credit. You can't beat that price. I love Coda, and I know you will too. Thanks to Coda for supporting MacVoices. Eric, you're dancing around something I keep thinking that, yeah, they're all being put out there because there's almost a demand for them. And there's a sense that if we don't do this soon, we're going to be left in the dust. At the same time, these are not necessarily finished products. The whole concept is not finished. I mean, the fact that we have ChatGPT 3 and ChatGPT 4, and the other day I heard something about just in passing a ChatGPT 5. So these are iterations on things that are going to get better. And I can't help but be reminded of something, and I hope somebody will help me because I'm not quite sure what my memory is recalling about how they tried to I think feed a GPT model with things from social media, and it ended up being racist and homophobic and nasty and vile to the point that they had to take it down. And so clearly, hopefully whoever they was that did that experiment, learned something from it. But this is all experimentation of where we're going to go with this and where the boundaries are and where the rules are.
Well, that actually is a point in their complaint. They point out the relative, the different body text corpus, text bodies that they used, and the relative weight they gave. And they did apply a lot of value to the New York Times article base. So they're suing for that. So I think yes, I think they're due some compensation. But again, we've heard sort of the backstory. They were in negotiations, and at some point it broke down, and now angry partner is suing against the other one. So it's like we're talking about in the Apple Watch case. There's hurt business feelings, and there may be some gray zones in the law, and there's a court case, cause of action, and we'll just have to see how it gets resolved.
Yeah. Eric reminded me it was Microsoft that had that problem. Thank you, Eric. You're right. That did it. Brian, you've been talking way too much tonight.
I had been thinking when it was mentioned that the New York Times, some of these articles that were found through ChatGPT were open, non-paywalled at least. It got me thinking on that particular aspect of the story. And I was thinking, well, yeah, but when you go to a website that's not paywalled, or to read an article that's not paywalled, there are other things usually on the sidebars and throughout the article that eyeballs are looking at. Those are advertisements. And when you ask the ChatGPT for a response, and if it's digging up that information through a non-paywalled source, you're skipping and bypassing those advertisements, those sponsors and things of that nature that, in a sense, are paying for that article, even if you're not financially pulling it out of your wallet yourself to pay for it. Maybe think of, just the idea of, broadcasting, over-the-air broadcasting, your regular channels of, your local CBS, NBC, ABC, etc. And, how over the last few years, there have been a couple companies that have come and gone through litigation because they've rebroadcasted those into a streaming source where you were able to, you still have the commercials and everything, but the courts had struck those down, saying that you couldn't just rebroadcast it. So if an LLM model is coming through and bringing through those verbatim stories and the information, yeah, that does sound not right. And I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't the first of many more to be seen in this way.
That's a really interesting point, because you're drawing an analogy somewhere in there about ad blockers, and how the advertisers are buying ads on those sites so their advertisements are seen, and ad blockers block that. And so and then Jeff brought up a real good point that he wrote articles for the Mac Observer, among others, and those articles have at least potentially been scraped to train a large language model. And Jeff, don't want me to put words in your mouth, but I get the impression you weren't really enamored with the idea.
No, I would at least like to be asked, is it okay if we use content you wrote? And if not me, ask the sites where it's published and have them give permission. It's just taking the stuff that doesn't sit well with me.
Okay, and that's very fair. But also it was either last show or 2 shows ago, we had a discussion about the Internet Archive and how they went and just wholesale downloaded entire websites under the heading of archiving them for historical purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Would it have been nice if we had been asked? Well, at the time, they didn't think about it, and we didn't think about
it. But now we are thinking about it.
I think that's the internet. I mean, it also gets reproduced in my browser when I look at it there, and Akamai is reproducing this, and it's getting copied through routers. If you don't want something ever copied, don't put it on the internet.
I think this is also some of the reason why people were driving content behind paywalls, because originally back in the aughts, after Google, grew and everyone loved it, and then they went public, and then people realized, oh my God, they have a lot of money there, and they were suing them, for, indexing, their, site content and driving people there. And I think some of the general discussion then was, if you put it out there and it's for free use, it's out there and it's for free use. And, as long as they're not violating copyright, which is a very narrow set of protections, it's out there, and you really can't, take a, cause of action against them. I think, again, just doing some, quick calculation here. If the New York Times said they had like 10 million, pages, if sort of undifferentiated, page views on the internet are about, I'm rounding down, from like $4 or $5 per thousand views to $1 per thousand views, just to make the math work out. It seems then that the total value of, the New York Times website is, on the order of, $100,000. So, and again, ports and valuations and everything in business, you have all these different points of views, and hopefully they kind of converge to something that's consistent instead of being dramatically opposed. But again, yes, I think, at a minimal level, what's the incremental cost of, the server and bandwidth time that the New York Times, incurred, training those models? What's the maybe lost, undifferentiated advertising cost? That's another thing. Versus whatever they're saying, $15,000 per, article per incident for violated, times, $10 million, that gives some gazillion, huge view. So again, there's all these different points of view, and we're going to have to see, what happens. And I think the key issue is going to be, in turn on what is derivative use, and understanding statistical patterns, so we can write something in the style of William Shakespeare or Edgar Allan Poe. Understanding those different statistical properties, does that violate any fair use, content? Or at least that's the way, if I were advising one of the law firms, defending, ChatGPT, I would, try to take a look at that, because, the words are not, the order of words is copyrightable. The ideas within them, not so much, and again, there's lots of different domains that, unfortunately, I'm sure James can comment in here, that lawyers are great at, finding shades of gray between all sorts of different things. And that's what we're going to evolve here.
Mark Fuccio, attorney at law. Guys, this has been really interesting. Thank you. It just goes to show you, I think, how much gray is out there in these areas. And from the New York Times and ChatGPT to the Apple Watch ban, we all have a lot to learn and a lot of different things to think about and ways to look at it. As Mark said, everybody seems to have an angle to look at it, especially the attorneys. Let's go around the room, let folks know where they can find you, and then we'll get out of here. So I'm going to keep the order, well, at least the way it looks on my screen at the moment, because it's been juggling around a little. So Dave Ginsburg is first up. Dave, thank you so much for being here on the first show of 2024. Where can folks connect with you?
Yeah, thank you, Chuck, and Happy New Year. Glad to be here. You can find me at In Touch with iOS at intouchwithios.com. Find me on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/intouchwithios. I'm here on Tuesday nights, and we record In Touch with iOS on Thursday nights, and I'm on the Mac Show. Got that coming back on Friday on the British Tech Network, and I'm on Mastodon at DaveG65 at mastodon.club. Thanks again.
Thank you, David. Brian Flanagan Arthurs, thank you so much for being here and for bringing James with you. Where can folks connect with you?
So much. I appreciate so much for having me. Happy New Year. And where you can find me best is on Mastodon, Brian8944 at mastodon.cloud. And thank you very much.
Great. And James, I'll get you to do yours again, even though you gave it to us before. I want to make sure folks know where they can find you.
Well, first off, thank you, Chuck, and everyone for hearing my thoughts today and having me part of this awesome podcast. You could reach me at X, formerly known as Twitter, on Justin B. James, and also through Instagram at BreadBunandTrampest.
Great. Good to have you. We'll see you again sometime. I definitely want to hear what your further adventures are. Jim Ray, thank you so much for being here. Where can folks connect with you?
Well, you can find me on the internet at provue.com, spelled funny, PROVUE.com, and also on Mastodon at ProvueJim at techhub.social, and still ongoing at artisanalsoftwarefestival.com.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Eric Bolden, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see what the birds are doing next week or the week after. Where can folks connect with you?
You can find me on Mastodon at EA Bolden at techhub.social, or for the birds, EA Bolden at mas.to.
You have a channel just for the birds. I like it. I like it. Jeff Gamet, thank you for being here as always with your thoughts. Where can folks connect with you?
Chuck, it's always a treat to get to hang out with you. And James, seriously, it's great to meet you. I'm glad you joined us tonight.
Thank you so much. Great to meet you too.
Okay, where to find me? Social media, Jay Gamet, Mastodon, Instagram, Threads. Then shows. Seriously, this is my first show of the year. Here on Tuesdays with you, Chuck, then on Thursdays with Dave, because Dave graciously lets me join in on In Touch with iOS. Then for the British Tech Network, the Big Show on Fridays, the Mac Show. It's been a while. The Big Show on Thursdays, the Mac Show on Fridays, and also the Context Machine. Do that with Brian Chaffin. Wow, I'm out of practice.
Too much time off, Jeff.
I should have ChatGPT write that for me.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Web Bixby, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad you were able to make it. What's the best way for folks to contact you?
You can usually find me at Web Bixby, WEBBIXBY, just about anywhere. But today I will do Web Bixby at Blue Sky and on that platform. So I'm there too. So
all web all the time.
All web all the time.
Thanks, Web. Last but absolutely not least, Mark Fuccio, thank you for your commentary. Where can folks connect with you?
At the site known as X, MARKFUCCIO, at Mark Fuccio. And back to you.
15 years ago. Wow. I'm still processing that after the beginning of the show. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. We do this Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, whatever time that is, wherever you are. YouTube.com/MacVoicesTV. Except for next week. We will be dark because I will be at CES, and there's just no realistic way to do CES and do this show at the same time. So we'll be back the following week to talk a little bit about CES and whatever has happened in the world of Apple tech between now and then. As always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.